The US and France see eye to eye on a range of issues, combating terrorism, the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, and world peace. But a new levy could drive a wedge between the long-standing allies. A US report on France's digital services tax says the measure will unfairly punish companies like Amazon and Facebook.
There are companies, they're American companies. I want to tax those companies. They're not going to be taxed by France, so France is going to put a tax on. It was totally out of the blue. He just had the idea. Emmanuel had an idea, let's tax those companies. Well, they're American companies. I'm not going to let people take advantage of American companies, because if anyone's going to take advantage of the American companies, it's going to be us. It's not going to be France.
France is charging 3% on revenues earned by large firms providing digital services in the country. It applies to businesses with a global revenue of hundreds of millions of dollars. But Washington says the tax is unfair. In retaliation, it's threatening heavy duties on French goods like cheese and wine, roughly $2.5 billion worth.
The new sanctions against France are unacceptable. It's not acceptable from an ally. It's not the attitude we expect. France is one of America's major allies. Things are clear between the United States and us, the European states. Should there be new US sanctions, the EU will be ready to retaliate.
The US and France do enjoy strong trade and investment relations. On average, commercial transactions worth more than $1 billion take place every single day. But in other areas, their ties are unraveling. The two differ on NATO's effectiveness and how the world should address the climate crisis. France says its tax does not discriminate and applies equally to American, Chinese and British companies, and that a retaliatory US tariff is counterproductive, not something it expects from an ally. Regan Devine, TRT World.
All right, let's explore the implications of these developments with Daniel Lacalle. He's the chief economist at the investment firm Tressis and joins me from Madrid. Thank you for joining us on the program. Daniel, you know, a trade war with China is one thing, but France is one of America's main allies. What does this mean for relations between the two countries?
It is quite a problem. It is quite a problem because what we have seen is that France decided to put a unilateral tax on the internet giants, and that has created quite a friction with the United States, because they were expecting to have a dialogue with the rest of the allied countries about the process of taxation, about bilateral agreements, etc. And what we are seeing is that the frictions between the United States and the European Union, which seem to be quite far away from the trade dispute with China, are coming back to the fore. And it's very likely that the United States starts talking about the problems that they continue to see with the subsidies to automotive, the subsidies to Airbus, etc. So it's an ongoing challenge to global trade. Absolutely, it is.
Right. So what are the larger implications here? I mean, what does it mean for the future of negotiations between the two countries, or for that matter, between the U.S. and any other country?
Yeah, I think it means that it's going to be much more difficult than what many commentators, economists, and politicians expected to reach long-lasting agreements between the United States and the rest of its trading partners, because what we are seeing is that the cracks in the previous bilateral agreements are much more severe than what initially could have been expected. So what would be the clearest implications? First, we are already seeing a weakening of global trade growth. I think that is likely to persist. Second, I think that unfortunately, when one country introduces tariffs, the opposite country, instead of opening its economy, uses it as a subterfuge to increase tariffs themselves. So unfortunately, what we're also likely to see is an increase in protectionist measures from both sides. So it's very, very complicated to me.
Right. France warned of strong EU retaliation if these tariffs are imposed. So what retaliation might we see? Are you saying that we might see just more tariffs in kind?
It is possible. It is possible, but the European Union doesn't have a very strong, let's say, ace card to play with the United States. Let's remember that the United States exports very little, exports about 11% of its GDP, whilst most of the recovery of the European Union came from exports, and there's been a widening of the trade surplus that the European Union has with the United States, quite significant. So I think that what we are likely to see is that if the European Union puts retaliatory tariffs on the United States, the impact for the United States is going to be minimal. However, if the US decides to go aggressively against the European Union, particularly on the automotive industry and agriculture, it could be very, very damaging for the European Union. The European Union does not have a strong arm against the United States precisely because of the very large trade surplus that the European Union has with the United States.
I want to bring in briefly, Trump seemed to be in tariff mode on Monday, and he announced that he wants to impose tariffs on Brazil and Argentina, which seemed to catch many people by surprise. So what's behind this decision?
I think that this is quite a surprise. Absolutely agree with that, because the reason for this new set of tariffs is fundamentally that the Trump administration believes that the devaluation of the local currencies that Argentina and Brazil have seen has been some sort of an unfair decision that has given them a competitive advantage in terms of exports. There is absolutely no evidence of that. First, the devaluation of the peso and the real, like the devaluation of many emerging market currencies, has had nothing to do with an aggressive stance from the governments of those countries, but due to the weakness of global trade, due to the weakness of exports, and due to the weakening of the monetary policy of those countries. And I think that putting tariffs is not going to solve that problem. I think that the U.S. administration is talking about a strong dollar aggressively when there is absolutely no evidence that the dollar is too strong. The dollar is in the same range, the DXY index, that it's been in the last 5 years. And the weakness of some emerging market currencies has not been sort of a hidden agenda of governments to export more, but rather just a reflection of the rising imbalances of those economies. Nothing, let's say, hidden there.
Okay, we'll leave it there for now. Daniel Lacalle joining us from Madrid. Thank you for your time.